Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. Seoul's diplomacy push. President Moon Jae-in's special envoy, now in Beijing, credits Chinese President Xi Jinping for his role in nudging North Korea toward denuclearization talks with the United States. The South Korean government draws up a draft of a bill to revise the constitution. It's likely to include cutting the presidential term from 5 to 4 years and allowing presidents to run for re-election. Plus, in around 24 hours from now, prosecutors will begin their interrogation of former President Lee Myung-bak, who is under investigation for corruption allegations. So, as President Moon Jae-in leads the overtures of dialogue with North Korea, his key officials continue their efforts to bring regional powers on board. His national security advisor met with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday and heads to Russia soon, while his intel chief is set to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the coming hours. Our chief Blue House correspondent Moon Gon-young starts us off.
With the two Koreas' decision to hold a historic summit in late April and the U.S. President Donald Trump's stunning decision to accept a face-to-face meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, all set to happen in the next 2 months, South Korean President Moon Jae-in remains extra cautious in taking the process forward so as to not blow off a hard-won chance.
한반도 비핵화와 항구적 평화 체제, 남북 공동 번영의 길을 열 수 있는 소중한 기회가 마련되었습니다. 그러나 우리가 2달이라는 짧은 기간에 이루려고 하는 것은 지금까지 세계가 성공하지 못했던 대전환의 길입니다. 그래서 그 결과도 낙관하기가 어렵고 과정도 조심스러운 것이 현실입니다.
While the president pleaded for nationwide support for the success of the upcoming talks, overseas, his key officials began carrying out Mr. Moon's efforts to bring jittery regional powers on board. In Beijing, President Moon's national security advisor Chung Eui-young sat down with Chinese President Xi Jinping for 35 minutes on Monday as a parallel delegation headed to Tokyo to brief Japanese officials on the attempts to open talks with Pyongyang on its nuclear and missile program. The Chinese leader told the South Korean official that China is on the same page with Seoul and that he hopes for a smooth inter-Korean summit while giving credit to the South for great progress in getting North Korea and the U.S. to agree to dialogue. President Moon's chief envoy praised the role of China and President Xi in nudging North Korea toward denuclearization and getting Pyongyang and Washington to agree to talks. Chung will travel to Russia on Tuesday to bring Russian officials up to speed. In Tokyo, South Korea's National Intelligence Service Chief Seo Hoon met with Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono and detailed his recent trip to Pyongyang and the subsequent talks. Tokyo's foreign minister said Japan would work closely with Seoul and Washington on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, calling the situation a near miracle. Seo is scheduled to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga before returning to Seoul on Tuesday.
The South Korean president says the fate of this country and the Korean Peninsula hangs on how things are handled in the next 2 months, this opportunity that has landed in the world's hands like a miracle. And amid lingering uncertainty and anxiety running through the minds of all those involved in this process, experts warn you can never be too careful in a delicate situation like this, and don't count your summits until they're hatched. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
Now, while preparations for the upcoming North Korea summits are coming along fairly well, still in early stages, the United Nations has chimed in, saying human rights must be part of any discussions with Pyongyang. Speaking at the UN Human Rights Council on Monday, Thomas Quintana, a special rapporteur on human rights, added that North Korea should allow him to visit and make an assessment on the ground. This is the envoy, saying that he expects from the DPRK in this new environment in regards to negotiations on the nuclear issue. North Korea had been repeatedly slammed for its human rights abuses, including the execution of prisoners and its system of state-run gulags. As for detainees in the north, 6 South Koreans and 3 American citizens remain in captivity in North Korea. Turning now to the ongoing negotiations between South Korea and the United States on defense cost sharing. Seoul says the deal appears to be on a difficult path, referring to President Trump's push to get South Korea to pay more for the tens of thousands of American troops who are deployed here. Oh Jung-hee with the details.
South Korea and the United States have begun a new round of negotiations on sharing the cost of stationing U.S. forces in South Korea, and Seoul says the talks could be tough. Last week, foreign affairs and defense officials from Seoul and Washington met in Hawaii for the first round of negotiations on what's called the Special Measures Agreement. Briefing reporters on the results, Seoul's foreign ministry called it an exploratory and basic exchange of opinions. It added that from now on, the negotiation process could become more difficult and require more than just 1 or 2 meetings. But the ministry also said both sides agree that the costs have to be shared in a way that strengthens the Seoul-Washington alliance in their combined defense posture. The two sides agreed to meet again in South Korea next month. Since 1967, the U.S. has covered the financial costs of its troops in South Korea, while Seoul provided the land and facilities. But starting from 1991, the two sides started to share the costs under the Special Measures Agreements, or SMA. The 9th SMA, signed in 2014, expires this year, which is why Seoul and Washington are looking to sign a 10th one for the years to come. The costs include the hiring of South Korean workers at U.S. bases, facility construction, and logistical support. South Korea is known to have covered roughly 45 to 50% of the total cost, to the tune of almost $900 million. 오정희, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has finished drawing up its proposal for a much-awaited constitutional amendment, and today that draft will be reported to President Moon Jae-in during a luncheon with the Special Advisory Committee on Constitutional Revision. The presidential office says President Moon plans on submitting the draft on March 21st, that is next Wednesday, adding that the date was set in accordance to the National Assembly's 60-day deliberation period. Officials from the top office added that the government will build on the report of the Special Advisory Committee to finalise the bill. Though no details have been released, the proposal is likely to include a change to the presidential system to disperse some executive powers, but also to allow presidents to seek a second term if they wish to do so. President Moon and the ruling party want to hold a referendum on a constitutional revision on the day of the June 13th local elections. It's a critical week in the prosecution's investigation into ex-President Lee Myung-bak. The former Conservative leader finds himself in hot water related to numerous charges as prosecutors appear to have built a strong case against him. The latest twist in the intrigue comes on Wednesday as Lee has been subpoenaed for questioning for the very first time. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With 5 months of intense investigations under their belt, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office has subpoenaed former President Lee Myung-bak to appear at the office on Wednesday for interrogation as a suspect. The 76-year-old is facing nearly 20 charges, including violation of law on the management of presidential records and violations related to election law. Lee is suspected of receiving some $10.3 million in illegal funds from the State Intelligence Agency, individuals and businesses, including Korea's largest conglomerate, Samsung. Under the Act of Aggravated Punishment of Specific Crimes, anyone found guilty of receiving bribes in excess of $90,000 can face at least 10 years behind bars. The former president says he was not aware of any money transfers, and he has labeled the prosecution's probe as an act of political revenge by the Moon Jae-in administration. Investigators have also unearthed evidence that Lee is the real owner of DAS, a corruption-ridden car parts manufacturer, with the prosecution set to ask him about irregularities in the company's accounts, including slush funds totaling more than $28 million. Prosecutors believe a significant portion of these secret funds were used to finance Lee's presidential campaign in 2007. Prosecutors are also likely to grill Lee over presidential records, which were found in storage at DA's offices and not at the National Archives as required by law, and allegations he evaded tax by holding property and savings under borrowed names. With a long list of charges and allegations, the nation awaits the results of the questioning, which gets underway on Wednesday morning but could continue deep into the night. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United States is yet to give guidelines on the exact procedure for exemptions on steel and aluminium import tariffs. President Trump signed off on his tariff proposals last week, saying there will be exemptions if countries can show ways to reduce the security threat to the United States. But the White House hasn't produced any clear guidelines on those exemptions. Currently, Canada and Mexico have temporary exemptions, and Australia is also likely to be exempt. But other countries will see tariffs take effect if they don't get exemptions by March 23rd. South Korea is working on getting exemptions, with Seoul's trade minister traveling to Washington for the third time in less than a month to meet with U.S. policymakers. While the Me Too movement continues to sweep across the country, the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women has provided recommendations for South Korea's underreporting of sexual violence. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
The UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women has called for the South Korean government to take action against the underreporting of sexual violence due to stigma. The recommendation was made as the committee held its 69th session to review women's rights in 8 countries, including South Korea. The committee also showed concerns over the country's defamation law, which discourages victims of sexual assault from filing complaints against the perpetrators, as they may be countersued for defamation. It also pointed to the lack of punishment for perpetrators, explaining that only 83 cases of workplace sexual assault received punishment out of the more than 1,600 cases reported from 2012 to 2015. Meanwhile, the British daily The Telegraph has reported on the backlash against the Me Too movement that has been sweeping across South Korea. It said the recent suicide of actor Cho Min-gi, who was accused of sexual assault, triggered a backlash against the movement, with critics saying it's turned into a witch hunt that promotes prejudice against men. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the wind of change brought on by Korea's own Me Too movement, the number of investigations into cases of sexual harassment and assault many involving high-profile figures continues to grow. Among the accused is a very well-known theatre director who's scheduled to be summoned by police for questioning in the coming days. Our Park Ji-won reports.
Korean police are investigating more than 40 people accused of sexual assault and/or sexual harassment. This week, they will be summoning 65-year-old theater director Lee Yoon-taek, one of Korea's most prominent playwrights and theater artistic directors. Lee is accused by 16 women, all from theatrical circles, who claim that Lee sexually assaulted them at different times between 1999 and 2016. Lee has been banned from traveling overseas, and police have interviewed 10 of the 16 accusers so far. On Sunday, the police conducted raids searching for evidence at Lee's residence in Seoul and at theater studios and offices related to him. They have also launched a preliminary investigation into renowned film director Kim Ki-duk. The international award-winning filmmaker now faces multiple accusations of rape and sexual assault. 3 actresses claim that they were raped and assaulted either at film sets or in hotel rooms. Kim is reportedly abroad now and has said there was no coercion in his relationships with the women, but the police have been in touch with the accusers as they investigate. 52-year-old actor Cho Jae-hyun is also accused of rape on the set of a Kim Ki-duk film, plus other incidents of sexual harassment, which the police are looking into. Starting this Thursday, the police will launch a special task force to streamline the complicated process of investigating sex-related crimes. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we're going to start in Nepal. A plane flying from the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka and carrying 71 passengers and crew has crashed. Upon landing at Nepal's Kathmandu airport, nearly 50 people are reported to have been killed. For more on this and other international news, we turn to our Noah Aram. So Aram, do we know what might have caused this crash?
Well, Mark, there are conflicting accounts from the airliner and the airport on what happened. The CEO of US Bangla Airlines accuses Kathmandu's air traffic control for giving wrong signals. He added that the captain, who survived the crash, had more than 5,000 flying hours under his belt. He also insisted that after hearing air traffic control conversation, the pilot was not to blame. But the general manager of the airport says the pilot disregarded their messages and came in from the wrong direction. Airport officials had apparently told the pilot to approach the runway from the south, but he instead came in for landing from the north. When asked if things were okay, they said the pilot replied yes. Officials then told him that the plane was not properly aligned with the runway, to which there was no reply. Witnesses say the plane swerved repeatedly and was flying low before the accident happened. The charred remnants of the aircraft have been scattered across a grassy field near the runway, and rescuers are scouring the crash site. Just over a dozen people are said to have been pulled from the wreckage and are receiving treatment at a nearby hospital. The Nepalese Prime Minister, who visited the crash site, has promised an immediate investigation. The mountainous area of Nepal is notorious for poor air safety, and small planes often run into trouble at remote airstrips. A cronyism scandal linked to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has grown to a new level after the Finance Ministry admitted to tampering with documents. They relate to the sale of state-owned land at a huge discount to school operator Moritomo Gakuen, which has ties to the Prime Minister's wife, Akie. The Prime Minister admitted on Monday that the ministry admitted on Monday that it altered the documents to remove references to Abe and his wife before they were handed over to Parliament. Abe issued an apology, saying he feels keenly responsible and admitted the situation may erode public trust in his administration. He, however, has repeatedly denied he or his wife did favours for the school operator and said last year he would resign if evidence was found linking them to the scandal. Greece has suspended its Super League football fixtures after the president of club PAOK Salonika stormed onto the pitch with a holstered gun to protest a disallowed goal. Ivan Savidis, accompanied by his bodyguards, confronted the referee in Sunday's match against AK Athens with what appeared to be a handgun strapped to his waist. His club had a late winning goal ruled out for offside. The game was eventually abandoned 2 hours after the commotion, and local police are seeking to arrest Savidis. The Greek government says all matches in the top-flight league will be suspended until all sides agree to a clear framework of conditions and rules. The designer Hubert de Givenchy, one of the great names of French fashion, has died at the age of 91. One of his best-known creations was the famous little black dress worn by Audrey Hepburns in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Givenchy came from an aristocratic family and worked alongside the then-unknown Pierre Balmain and Christian Dior after World War II. He was employed by the designer Elsa Schiaparelli before leaving to found his own fashion house in 1952.
So let's start our coverage of the Pyeongchang Winter Paralympic Games with curling. Unlike the Winter Olympics, where there are only mixed teams unlike the Winter Olympics, when there are men's and women's teams, there are only mixed teams at the Paralympics. And South Korea's team were back on the ice on Monday after they had an incredible victory over Canada earlier in the day. However, the team couldn't keep their run going in their afternoon game. They lost, unfortunately, to Germany 4-3. That said, South Korea is still in a good position to make the semi-finals with 4 victories and just 1 loss in the round-robin prelims. In ice hockey, the stage is set for the big match at noon today. In less than 2 hours' time, the undefeated South Korean team faces off against the American team that has also won all of their matches so far. The host nation, led by their 48-year-old captain Han Min-soo, is coming off 2 straight wins and will look to make it 3 straight against USA. But it's not going to be easy, as the Americans are one of the best offensive teams in the Winter Paralympics, having won their first 2 matches 10-0 against Japan and the Czech Republic. However, with a win today, the host nation can secure a spot in the semi-finals. Now we're going to stay with the Paralympics, and in a meeting with his top aides on Monday, President Moon Jae-in expressed hope that the Pyeongchang Winter Paralympics will boost positive awareness of people with disabilities, similar to how social perceptions were changed by the 1988 Summer Paralympics in Seoul.
장애인과 비장애인이 더불어 살아가는 아름다운 세상을 구현하려는 패럴림픽까지 성공시켜야 올림픽의 진정한 성공을 말할 수 있을 것입니다.
The South Korean leader called for the public to show support for the Paralympics, just as they did for the Winter Olympics in February. President Moon noted the lack of coverage of the global sporting event by much of the Korean media, and he urged them to allocate more airtime for the Paralympics so that more people can catch the exciting competitions. Now we're going to do our weather update a little differently today. Our favourite weathercaster, Lee Ji-hyun, is going to join us live from AT Yangjae Flower Market Centre. So, Ji-hyun, the weather is a lot milder these days, but unfortunately the fine dust is back. However, I believe you are going to tell us how having some plants around your house or apartment can help us breathe a little easier.
Hello and good morning, Mark. Yes, well, as you said, certain plants like spider plant and peace lily are known for air purifying qualities, but most of other plants also help to clean the air. It's spring, so you might want to get one of these lovely, beautiful spring plants, because we'll have more days with fine dust and ultra fine dust, as well as yellow dust. I mean, yesterday, many people were suffering from itchy eyes and sore throats, even myself, as the whole nation was choked by high levels of fine dust all day, with an ultra-fine dust advisory being issued here in the capital. And the air quality will improve by the afternoon, but be sure to check the levels before heading out. Temperature-wise, the high in Seoul will be at 17 degrees Celsius, while southern regions will have higher highs, hovering at 20 degrees Celsius. Now, tomorrow will be even warmer, with an expected high of 20 degrees in Seoul. Then nationwide rain on Thursday will bring back the temperatures that we would normally expect around this time of the year. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.
The ever so awaited, mesmerising Pyeongchang